Will Bowen.
Hello.
What dream match will you never get to see? Oh, sorry, not that it matters. Will Bowen, what's your dream match that we'll never get to see?
Well, I pulled the short straw here at WhatCulture Towers, so I have to be the one to say Sting versus The Undertaker. Like, it is the match, really, isn't it? And the thing is, it would have been all right if it had just never had a chance of happening, if Sting had just stayed in TNA and then have ended up in AEW. But we had that window, we had that moment at WrestleMania where it could have been Sting versus The Undertaker. Would it have been as good as we were all hoping for? Probably by that point in their career, no. But nevertheless, the excitement, the build that we could have had, the back and forth, and the anticipation going into that would be incredible. And it's just so frustrating because instead, we got Sting versus Triple H, of course, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Michael Sidgwick, but just to educate you a little bit, WCW actually lost the Monday Night Wars, and obviously that was sort of echoed in the match, you know, Sting teaming up with his best friends, as we all remember from WCW, the NWO, but in the end, Triple H told him to suck it, and obviously beating him. What was Taker even doing at that Mania?
Suck what?
He suck his penis. What was Taker
Bray Wyatt.
Bray Wyatt. I mean, like, it's just so frustrating because it was so close. There's going to be many matches on this that, you know, are dream matches that people's schedules or, you know, just the time in their career didn't quite line up. But it was right there. And we had to have Triple H beat Sting in the daytime at WrestleMania instead.
Well, guess what? It's a Mick Foley match.
Oh, what?
Obviously, who knew what was going to happen there? But yeah, this was kind of teased, I guess, recently when Mick Foley had that mental idea of coming back for one last match as a way of losing weight to build up to a death match when you're already very broken, until the doctors came and ruined it all by saying, no, stop, you will die. But there was two names that were kind of being teased through that. The first one was Matt Cardona a lot, obviously because of the GCW stuff and all the sort of deathmatch stuff that he's been doing through that. But the other one is the one that I would have desperately wanted, mainly because you know it's one of his dream matches as well. But Jon Moxley versus Mick Foley. Whoa. Not necessarily like a comeback Mick Foley, but if you could get them both in their prime, my God, that match would be amazing. Not only for how just ridiculously brutal it would be, especially if it like wasn't in a WWE environment and they did it in AEW or whatever, but the build up to that match, you've got like two very unique but absolutely amazing promo guys. So the lead up to it, the build to it would be amazing. You know, Jon Moxley would be doing his all for it because he's blatantly a Mick Foley fan. Look at the style that he wrestles, come on. And I just think the build up, the storylines, the promos to it, and then the just carnage and brutality, but also like just wonderfulness of the match that would end it all would just be absolutely beautiful. So that is what I would go for. Mick Foley versus Jon Moxley. And there would be a lot of blood.
A dream match we're obviously never going to see because it's just way too late, and obviously one of them is probably going to be retiring at WrestleMania 41, is Steve Austin versus Goldberg. Now, there were kind of opportunities to do this. I mean, not really. Goldberg would have had to have come in 2001. When WCW was bought by WWE, but he didn't. I totally understand why. He was on a massive Time Warner contract. He could just sit at home and earn millions of dollars. I'm sure he was pretty much beat up by then too, so he was able to recover. Don't forget when he finally debuted for WWE, it was basically the night after Stone Cold Steve Austin had retired, but nobody knew that Steve Austin had retired. Now, would it have been as good as everybody anticipated? I don't know, you can't answer that. But it was just, I mean, this was like, if you could have done it at WrestleMania 1918, when you had Hulk versus The Rock, if you could have also have done Austin versus Goldberg, and of course he fought Scott Hall instead, I just think that would have been perfect, right? Because even though nowadays I think Steve Austin says he actually probably should have fought Hulk Hogan, but he didn't trust his devious ways, understandably. I still think if you could have put Goldberg versus Austin on that show, I mean, obviously they look the same, but they also peaked in the two different companies around the same time, and that was the conversation everybody would have in the playground. Like, I'm not disparaging it at all, obviously it's one of the biggest matches ever, but I don't remember anyone saying The Rock versus Hulk Hogan when I was in this mystical playground I keep talking about. But you know, it's Spear versus Steiner, it was Jackhammer versus, and Austin didn't really have any other signature moves, Luthez Press. I mean, it kind of works. Luthez Press versus Spear, you can see that one. And Austin should have won, obviously. I love Goldberg, but Austin was my guy. But that would have, I mean, imagine the Survivor Series 2001 show that was headlined by Team WWEF versus Team WCW. Wasn't even, you hold it off to there and instead you had done Stone Cold versus Goldberg. I mean, I just think it would have done crazy numbers. I think people have talked about this before. One of the reasons he didn't come in is because, WWE didn't want to offer him that much money because they were worried about their own wage structure. But if you had put that match on pay-per-view, I imagine one night you probably would have paid for Goldberg for 2-3 years, they would have made a bunch of cash. But maybe it's for the best. You never know. Sometimes you do get these clashes and they don't work out the way that you intend. It's like when they say never meet your heroes. You can just keep the idea of it in your head and you can play it on WWE 2K. Don't know why I said that. They haven't sponsored me. If they would like to, I am available.
I don't know if it's like an ultimate dream match on par with something like Sting versus The Undertaker. But if it's like a dream match from history, intergenerational, that you just want to see. I want to see the Steiner brothers versus the Young Bucks, goddammit.
Yeah!
I want to see the Steiner brothers versus the Young Bucks. It's something I've thought about idly as like, I mean, that would just kick ass. That would kick all sorts of ass. Love the idea. Yes, it would be a physical mismatch, but that would inform the story. The Young Bucks being hyper obnoxious, skin of their teeth, surviving, just really being obnoxious. And what I like about it as well, this idea of Matt and Nick Jackson and their like PWG, not like peaks as like match-wise, but as a character, state of the art, just like being really, really full of themselves. Like they're the Steiner brothers, they're total monsters. They'll rip your heads off if they catch you, they will kill you. But they won't. Because you're the Young Bucks, you're untouchable, you're really obnoxious, you're too fast, you've got too many flips. Love the idea of the Steiner brothers actually catching them and going, you know what, I can actually do a fucking Frankensteiner? Which means I'm like probably more athletically impressive than you actually, and then I just think it would be like a really good dynamic of just little tossers eventually getting their faces eaten. And it would make me feel something, and increasingly wrestling does not do that.
Now, a lot of people talk about Bret Hart versus Kurt Angle, and rightly so. That match would have been absolutely phenomenal. As for Bret Hart himself, he's also often talked up about how he would have loved to have wrestled Rey Mysterio. That's something that just never managed to come together during the time that both of them spent in WCW, unfortunately. For me, though, I'm going to go a little bit different and throw out Bret Hart versus Gunther as my dream match suggestion. Now, obviously, Bret Hart was a technical wizard. To me, the greatest wrestler to ever lace up a pair of boots. But something that many people maybe overlook a little bit with Bret is how he was always, fully prepared to lay his stuff in. When a match called for it, Bret Hart was a snug son of a gun, and he was fully happy to be on the receiving end of such snugness. And they don't get much more brutal and snug these days than the Ring General and his meaty offense. Of course, on that offense, Bret has also made it known over the years how much he hates chops, famously restricting Ric Flair to the number of chops the Nature Boy could use in their matches back in the day, and also apparently once threatening to punch Ric Flair in the face should he not stick to that plan. Bret has even mentioned how he's not a fan of how often Gunther uses chops, being one of the few people who wasn't a fan of Gunther and Sheamus, that banger Clash of the Castle back in 2022. A match for me that was my match of the year. So one of the few times I would disagree with Bret Hart. I loved that match, but Bret, he was in attendance for it and was just like, yeah, too many chops. Now, we have technically seen Bret and Gunther share the ring together. That was, of course, Bret appearing on an episode of Raw last year, where Gunther said how dirty scumbag, how Goldberg was his favourite wrestler. Ooh, you naughty heel, you. But prime Bret Hart, the excellence of execution, the hitman, the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be, going up against the dominant heel world champion Gunther. That, for me, would make pro wrestling gold. And you know what? You know what would also be awesome? Owen Hart versus Gunther. I mean, Gunther has been a great base for so many high flyers over the years, and that style of Owens, the perfect meshing of smooth mat work, just flawless, and the explosive, innovative, athletic high flying that Owen mixed in as well. Yeah, man, that would also make pro wrestling gold. But I'm going to go Bret Hart versus Gunther, and if I get a second choice, I'm going Owen Hart versus Gunther.
Well, my dream match feels a little bit different to a lot of other people's, because you've heard like intergenerational pitches and stuff that like never really could have happened, but if you could do any wrestler versus any wrestler, you'd put them together and it'd be magic. Mine feels like it could have taken place in any period of each wrestler's prime, and regrettably, it could have taken place a year ago or maybe even years into the future, and still feels like it just won't happen, even when you're supposed to say never in wrestling. It's CM Punk versus Kenny Omega. Now, I'm not here to relitigate why that match obviously didn't happen when it did. We all know it's because Kenny Omega tried to steal Punk's dog. But that's in the past now. We're moving on. And ultimately, moving on is what has happened from any conversation around this match. My prior dream match was CM Punk versus Cody Rhodes. Woo! We're going to get that. Everything's going to be fine. Nothing can possibly stop that match happening. But it just doesn't feel like it's ever going to be in the stars anymore for Kenny Omega and CM Punk. Not only do, for like different reasons, both men feel like they're on the downswing of their respective careers. Look, Kenny Omega has said in interviews that he'd be kind of open to having that match with CM Punk. Punk hasn't said the same, but business is business. But it just doesn't feel like there's ever going to be a collision course between the two of them. Not that I want to take place on that show, but like it doesn't ever feel like it's going to happen. Kenny Omega's not going to go to WWE no matter how much I try and manifest it. CM Punk probably, at least not for a decade or so when he needs some money, won't return to AEW in any capacity. And in terms of them having enough time on the clock left physically, Omega might be hiding that he's got a bunch of years left, but obviously it's just a miracle that he's even back out there at all after his diverticulitis. Punk picks up knocks seemingly with every match and has obviously missed time a lot in recent years that suggests that his clock is kind of like ticking and ticking and ticking. I just don't feel like we're ever going to get one of what ultimately should have been AEW's biggest ever pay-per-view matches. Critics of both will suggest that, like, you know, Kenny Omega could blow CM Punk up, or like Kenny Omega would be, if you're a critic of Kenny Omega would be too flippy and not care about the psychology and all that. They're both dead wrong. Like, even if Punk was absolutely knackered, that would be folded into the story. Even if Kenny Omega was apparently like not interested in psychology, no, you would see a psychological battle for the ages between two of the all-time great wrestling chess players. But it feels genuinely less likely than something like, for example, the Steiners versus the Young Bucks in 2025, and I'm sadder for it.
Right, a dream match that I'm pretty convinced we will never ever see. Not now, anyway. There was a time when it probably could have happened, but now I don't think it's ever going to happen. Is Kenny Omega versus Rey Mysterio. Instantly, as soon as I've said that, I've said those two names, your mind has just gone, oh my, how have we not? How have we never had this match in all these years that these two have been active as pro wrestlers, just absolutely taking the world by storm? How has that never happened? Well, it probably could have potentially gone down, like towards the end of the 2010s, like that 2017, 2018 period when Ray was just traveling the world, having a great time, even appearing at All In, the first ever All In. I think they were both on that card, like that maybe could have happened at some point, but then obviously after this, Rey Mysterio came back to WWE, Kenny then kind of like started up AEW with Cody and like the Young Bucks, all that stuff, that went down, so then they were just on separate massive company rosters, like they were just doing their own thing, and now we've got to a point where Mysterio's probably going to wind down in the next couple of years. I say probably, we've been saying that for what feels like decades really. He just shows no signs of aging at all, so for all I know he could go for another 10 years, but just let's say hypothetically he's probably going to have like another couple of years like wrestling at the rate he's doing now. Kenny is probably going to stay in AEW for the next couple of years. Like, he signed a deal not too long ago, like a renewal, so he's probably going to stay there for at least a few more years. By the time that deal with AEW runs out, like, Rey Mysterio could have retired. That could have happened. So if Kenny even was going to go over to WWE at that point, let's just say if that ever did happen, Rey might not even be wrestling at that point. So it does feel like a dream match that's just slipped away from our grasps, and it breaks my heart because in my mind, you just imagine two of the smoothest, two of the greatest wrestlers of all time getting in there. It would be magic. They would create art, absolute art. There'd be slick counters. I could just see Kenny going for the one-winged angel and then Mysterio just like hurricane running out into a 619. Imagine Kenny Omega hitting a V-trigger on Rey Mysterio and just him crumbling, just dying, his head exploding. Maybe not, but like, you know what I mean? You can see it. You can see that happening, and it would have been incredible, but we've never had it, and we probably never will. It hurts. It really hurts my soul. These two have had incredible careers anyway, even without this match, but this is one that feels like it was so close. It probably could have happened. It just never did. And yeah, I get sad thinking about it. So this is a lovely topic to talk about because now my heart's broken.